Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head over to Estonia once again, and we're going to have a look at yet another of the beers that I brought back with me from my recent trip over there. So for this one then, we are going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. These guys are a very small scale operation, so much so that the owner of the brewery calls it his home brewing activities. But this beer is one that is very highly rated actually, and it's a style that I very much enjoy as well. So I have to say I'm very curious to see what this one has in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. I've been impressed with the standard of stuff that I've had from Estonia so far, but hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this one we are going to head to Pärnu in the southwest of the country, the summer capital. Lovely little town that I do recommend that you visit. And we're going to have a look at my first beer from Rotiküla Pruulikoda. So this particular beer is called the Nosferaator. It's the 2019 edition. It comes in at 7.9% ABV, and this one is a Rauchbock from what I understand. So yeah, very curious to see what this one has in store for us. As you'll know if you've watched the channel for any length of time, I'm a massive fan of Rauch beers. My whole journey with craft beer started when I discovered Schlenkerla Bock, I believe it was, thanks to my German flatmate Daniel, and then yeah, I expanded into all the other styles after that. So whenever I get the chance to try smoke beers, I am all over that. But this particular beer was bought at the Gambrinus store in Tartu, and Tarmo, if I remember his name rightly, he was the one that recommended this one to me because I told him that I liked smoke beers, and he put this one in my hand, and yeah, that was sold pretty much right away. But yeah, certainly curious to see what this one has in store for us. I haven't had too many smoke beers from Estonia actually, maybe just one or two if memory serves me correctly, but this one I think should be right up my street. So let's see how we get on with this one then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Rotiküla Pruulikoda. This is the very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel, of course, has a geography-based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you happen to be interested in. Do check out the playlist of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Estonian beers that I've reviewed for you, and that's being added to whenever I get the opportunity. We've still got a couple of beers left from my trip over there, and hopefully we'll get some more at some point in the future. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Rotiküla Pruulikoda then. So Rotiküla Pruulikoda, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Pärnu in the southwest of Estonia, the summer capital, and these beers are actually the homebrew releases of Rainer Margus. So Rainer has a background in IT, and he homebrewed for quite a long time, in fact, beginning in around 2010. He first started off using the Cooper's homebrewing kits, and over the years he gradually scaled up his operation, and he was learning from books and from sources on the internet as well. But the name Rotiküla apparently comes from the fact that part of the town where he lives had a problem with rats, and so people started calling this area of the town Rotiküla, or Rat Village, as it would translate into English. But since 2018 he's also been a brewer at the Pärnu brewery, and apparently they've just got their facility up and running this year, 2021, and he's going to release another version of this beer from that brewery at some point over the next year actually, which is quite exciting. But Nosferaator, this one, apparently was one of his homebrewing beers that was received very well at the festivals that he attended, and so he wanted to brew it on a larger scale and sell it commercially. So NCSO Brewery in Keila allowed him to use their equipment and brew a bigger batch of it, and so this is where this beer was brewed. But other than that, there is not much information available on this this brewery. That was all I was able to get a hold of, and thank you to Rainer for actually writing back to me through Facebook to provide that information for me, because I literally searched for these guys and there was nothing. I had no idea that this was basically a homebrewed beer, if you like. So yeah, always awesome when the breweries reply and help you sort these things out. But yeah, that is all I can tell you about Rotiküla Pruulikoda. I would say that it'd be cool if Reiner can kind of maintain this label, because it's quite a funny little story actually. It would be quite cool if he could retain this label and, you know, release a few beers under that every year, a slightly different range, you know, make it different German beers or something like that. That could be quite an interesting project for him. But yeah, as I say, that's all I can really tell you about these guys for the moment. If you want to learn more, you can check out the brewery Facebook page, and I'll put the link to that in the video description below. You can follow them on there, of course, and that will keep you up to date with all the latest goings on. And I believe there is an Untappd page for these guys too, but as I say, very small scale operation, so not really a real kind of website or anything like that for them. But yeah, let's crack on then and have a look at the beer itself. So I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on this one before we open it up. As you can see, lovely sort of almost pencil drawing type image of a cat there, which I think is great. Plain black bottle cap, of course. This one is a 330ml bottle. I have no idea what I paid for this. I think it might have been €3 something. I couldn't remember, but yeah, it wasn't too much anyway. But it tells you on the side here, the Nosferaator beer series began in 2015 with a dark double bock homebrewed for the jubilee of a sharp-clawed purring hairball named Nosferatu. So that must be named after his cat, I guess. But this started a yearly tradition to brew one dark, strong and smoky beer. But you're holding a 2019 version that is based on Munich malt smoked with alder and Pilsner malt smoked with beech. But hops are represented by the Tettnanger and Hallertau Hersbrucker. So yeah, Tettnang, of course, is the hop producing region in Baden-Württemberg in southwestern Germany, and Hallertau, of course, is the hop producing region in Bavaria, Bayern. So yeah, this one I think should be quite nice, a classic German style Rauchbock, I guess we could say. But yeah, this looks pretty nice actually. So yeah, nothing else we can really say about it other than to get it open. But yeah, it also has a little bit in Estonian as well, so that dual language, that thing on there on the language on the side is in both languages, I should say, but I'm not going to try and read the Estonian because I've got no idea about it actually. But yeah, let's get this guy out then and we'll get on with the tasting. The Nosferatu 2019 edition, a 7.9% Rauchbock from Rotiküla Pruulikoda in Pärnu in the southwest of Estonia. Let's get this guy out and see how we go. Now I will say that Reiner was a bit worried about the sort of quality of this beer because obviously I've had it for a little while, and the reason I had this one for a little while was because I couldn't find any information on the brewery. And of course, the thing is, if you buy IPAs and stuff like this, you know, you've got to review these first. So the bigger maltier beers like this tend to go on the back burner a little bit when it comes to reviews. So this one had been at the back of the fridge for a little while, but you know, being a Rauchbock and being a more kind of malty thing, I think it will probably have held up quite well, especially since it's, you know, 7.9%. It should be all right, I would think. But yeah, it should still be in decent condition. I think, you know, normally you would drink this within a year, and I think when I bought this actually, that would have been in August of 2020 that I bought it. So I've had it a year, and I guess it's probably been sitting in the shop in Gambrinus for not far off that as well. So yeah, should, as I say, hopefully still be okay. But yeah, before the head disappears on this one, then you can see it's poured with about a 1/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of fawn coloured head actually. I think fawn is probably a good description for the colour of this head there. But you can see this beer is pretty damn black actually. That is a very, very dark rosewoody type colour that you're getting out of this one. If you shine the light through it, it's almost got a little bit of a kind of Coca-Cola, Pepsi sort of colour to it. So yeah, that is quite interesting in fact. This is one of the darker Rauch beers I've had in terms of colour in fact. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on one, the type of malts that you use. This determines the kind of magnitude of the colour of your beer, if you like, the EBC rating. 2, the length of your wort boil is also going to play a role. The longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any adjuncts that you put in any barrel aging that you do can also affect that as well, but that's not really a factor you have to care about in beers like this. It's usually in sour beers that those two variables kind of come into play. But yeah, 1 or 2 big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass with this one, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it looks pretty nice. But as I say, one of the darker smoky beers that I've come across in recent times, so some very dark roasty malts in this beer, that's for sure. But yeah, it goes together very nicely. So yeah, I like it, I have to say. And just with the sheer darkness of this one, I'm really very curious to see what this has in store for us. But yeah, let's have a look at the aroma then and see how we get on. Let's go for it. That does smell very nice. Now, as I say, as I mentioned earlier, whole journey with craft beer began with these Bamberg Rauch beers. And of course, I was always a fan. I always liked a little bit of peated whiskey back from the motherland of Scotland. But yeah, the aroma of this one is absolutely lovely. If you're a smokehead, if you're a Rauch head, a smokehead, peat head, whatever you want to call it, this one I think will be right up your alley. That smells absolutely lovely. So yeah, you know, where do you even start to describe this one, to be honest with you? There's quite a few things in the backbone of this beer. So for me, the backbone certainly has that kind of nice, dry, woody character to it. You can certainly get the beech smoked malts, absolutely, those are quite distinctive. And the alder, I think, the alder seems to be a slightly drier wood. I do get the impression that this has got a slightly more dry and almost very slightly spicy woody character to it compared to what you would get from the Schlenkerla beers, which are of course, you know, these are of course beechwood smoked. You can also get Eiche smoked malts as well, which are oak smoked malts, and they tend to give you a wee bit more of a kind of sweeter and vanilla like woody character. So yeah, but yeah, the backbone of this beer is a lovely kind of dry woody character, a lovely dry woody character, some toasty bread crusty notes in there, absolutely a nice kind of brown bready note, but a nice kind of, as I say, brown. It's difficult to make up my mind on exactly what's going on here, because it's a mix, you know, woody backbone in there, and as I say, a bit of a kind of brighter, smoother woody note from the beech, a bit of a slightly drier and almost more spicy woody note in there. The smoky character is sitting on top of that. It's quite a sweet, smoky note. Of course, if we were, for example, talking about Scottish peat, it would be a little bit more kind of grassy and earthy, but no, both of the smoky notes that you get in this one are kind of quite sweet, to be honest with you. But on top of it, you get that kind of bread crusty layer. There's a nice kind of big brown bready sort of thing in there, and yeah, I like how that goes as well. So yeah, I think that is the basic backbone of this beer. Woodiness, the kind of smokiness kind of sitting on top of that, quite a sweet smokiness at that. You can smell the two different woods. The beech is a bit sweeter, the alder is a little bit kind of drier and almost kind of spicy in a sense, and then on top of that, toasty bread crust, bit of a more kind of brown German rye bread type thing going in there, and maybe one or two little nutty and leathery notes as well. Yeah, I think in the middle of the notes there's definitely a wee bit of a kind of nutty, leathery type quality, more leathery rather than anything else. But there will be a bit of brown sugar in this one as well. You know, Pilsner malt is always going to give you a little bit of brown sugar, and from the one thing I'm thinking about this beer is that, going by the colour of it and the sort of leatheriness that you get out of the beer too, because the brown sugars come across as quite leathery, to me that usually indicates that you've got a fairly long wort boil. So I would be curious to know about that, what the wort boil length in this one is, because it seems to be that you've got quite a bit of a leathery note out of this one, that's for sure, and that's usually an indicator of a longer wort boil. But yeah, it's nice to just sit and ponder this one over, because this is quite different from what we've had before actually. And the thing is, when you're brewing these on quite a small scale, you can afford to be really experimental and mess around with a lot of things in the beer. But I would say this one is quite nice, definitely one of the more leathery Rauch beers that I've come across. And remember, these beers are lagers actually, so it's cold temperature fermentation, bottom fermenting yeast. So the fermentation takes place usually between 8 to 12 degrees Celsius in these ones. So if this is a Rauchbock, yeah, it will be a lager beer. So yeah, that's another interesting thing to consider about these. You get a hell of a lot of flavour out of them for lager beers. So yeah, a lot of food for thought with this beer and the malty backbone of it. But I think we can't really say any more about that. But let's focus on the hoppy side of things then. And as I often say, with a beer that's a little bit older like this, you have to think that quite a lot of the hoppy character will have dropped out. So for me, you can still get the remnants of the hoppy character, but it does smell quite smooth at the in the kind of hoppy sense. So definitely a little bit of a kind of smooth earthiness to this one. Absolutely, and that's a characteristic of the German noble hops. German noble hops for me have a bit of smoothness to them, but they also have quite a bit of bright character. But you can certainly pick up the remnants of a more floral, aromatic sort of thing. Definitely a bit of a kind of lighter, grassy element in there as well. Tiny wee touch of zestiness left, but yeah, quite a smooth grassiness, I would say too. But yeah, the green hoppy component in this one has obviously dropped away quite a little bit. But on the fruity side of things, you know, there's a wee bit of a red fruity note to this one. It's almost like you've got a wee tiny little hint of raisin in this one, and I'm hoping that that's not a sign of oxidation, because that can be one of the things you can pick up there. But you certainly get, there's like almost little hints of like a kind of pruny dried plum sort of thing. Maybe a wee hint of you know, maybe just a wee hint of like a blackberry, black curranty sort of thing. And yeah, it goes together really well in that sense. But those fruity notes are very, very minimal. This beer is all about the kind of big smoky malts and a bit of the smoothness of the hops, I think, in fairness too. But yeah, those little fruity notes I'm picking up are very, very minimal, but you'll always get a little bit of fruitiness out of beer. That's unquestionable. Yeah, a little bit of dried kind of pruny character and one or two little blackberry, black curranty sort of things out of this one. So yeah, if you do get the chance to try this beer, take a bit of time to ponder over the aroma. It's certainly given me a lot of food for thought. But impressions of this one is it's a very smooth beer, but I think this has got quite a long wort boil behind it because of the leatheriness that you pick up from the brown sugary characters in this one. But yeah, this is going to be interesting. So let's go for it then and just see how we get on. So this one is the Nosferaator 2019 edition, 7.9% Rauchbock from Rotiküla Pruulikoda in at Pärnu in at the southwest of Estonia. Let's get stuck into this one. Slange, skål, cheers, tervisex. There we go. To say first off, it's very, very smooth, but the way this opens up is very nice actually, but not nearly as leathery as the at least in the beginning that the aroma would have you believe. But this is a very, very smooth beer, this one. But I'm going to say to them straight away, thumbs up. So this is a beer that I think Ryanair needs to keep going with, and you know, it would be quite cool to see them do a line of kind of German beers under this Rotiküla Pruulikoda name, in fact. But yeah, this is pretty damn impressive actually, so thumbs up for that. And I'm a big smokehead, as I say, I don't say that lightly, but this is very nice. And the thing that I like about it as well, it does have a little bit more kind of yeasty character and things to it. It's very, very bready and smooth, so you still get a little bit of that kind of raw, I call it the rawness of the homebrew, so you still get a little bit of that kind of small scale type vibe to it. I always just find that when you brew these beers on the kind of bigger scale, they just come across as, you know, a little bit kind of cleaner and things like that, but this one has a bit of that kind of almost smooth fluffiness that you would associate with a homebrew. So I like that about this beer. This one's got quite a bit of charm to it, but it's certainly right up my street, like I said. And the way that this beer progresses into the aftertaste is very interesting too. So yeah, a thumbs up for the Nosferaator actually. But let's try and break down the flavour for you and describe it a wee bit more kind of succinctly, should we say. So yeah, I think it's one of these beers that kind of, all the flavours that you pick up, or all the things that you pick up in the aroma show up in the flavour, but they just come out in a slightly different way. So the backbone of this beer is a mix of bread crusty and woody. So that goes right across the middle third of your palate and the back third of your palate. You can feel the smoothness of the wood. And like I was saying, I think the beech wood is the one that's giving you a slightly more smooth character toward the kind of front of the middle third of your palate, and then when you go further back from that, that's when you're going to get the slightly drier, more spicy kind of alder notes out of it. So yeah, that side of the beer I think is pretty interesting for sure. but yeah, definitely a smooth woody backbone to this one. Now, you do get a lovely bready character sitting on top of that, absolutely. So the breadiness on top of that woody layer, you can feel there's a sort of more grainy, slightly toasty bread crusty note in there, but there's certainly a layer of what I would describe as being similar to a German rye bread. It's certainly got a little bit of the sweetness that you would get from a German rye bread. I loved the German bakeries when I was living in Heidelberg. Absolutely loved them, and this beer certainly has that, which is great. So that sits on top of the woody layer, but as you move towards the kind of the front of that middle third of your palate, you can pick out a few sort of nutty qualities in there as well. You do get one or two very slightly nutty notes out of the beer, and some of the leathery notes that you get are there too. So sitting on top of the kind of bready layer in the middle third of your palate, I think we'll focus on the middle third of the palate now. Sitting in the bready side of things, you get a bit more of that kind of leathery quality in there, but at either end of the kind of bread crusty quality, at either end of the bready, in the bready layer of this thing, you get a bit more of a kind of stronger bread crusty element there, and then sitting on top of that bready layer, you've got quite a leathery, brown sugary note to this one. And as I say, to me, that indicates a slightly longer wort boil. Yeah, you can feel, you've got in the very centre of your palate, you can feel there is a sort of highly kind of caramelised, almost leathery brown sugary element to there. So there is a wee bit of that concentrated quality in there. When this is 7.9%, there is a wee bit of booziness in there. Normally these brown sugary notes are linked to the booziness of the beer. So in the dead centre of the middle third of your palate, you get that brown sugary note there, and you can feel it's quite highly treaclised and caramelised. But as you move further out from that, it's more leathery, and it's got a little bit of a toasty element to it. And as you push your way out towards the extremities of that middle third of your palate, then you've got a wee bit more of a kind of biscuity vibe to this one. You do get a little bit of a kind of McVitie's digestive biscuity sort of thing to this, but it's quite a dark brown sugary note that you get out of this beer. And I think the further you go into the aftertaste with this one, you can just feel the bready layer sort of thickening up as well. But whether that's the malt or the yeast, it's quite hard to tell. And again, I think this is one of the things about the beer being brewed on a very small scale. It's still got that kind of homebrewed fluffiness, kind of smoothness, rawness to it, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, this is an interesting one. One of the breadier Rauch beers, I would say, that I've had, and I think there is a good yeasty note to this one, I would say, but it's probably unfiltered. That's probably one of the other things you've got to consider about this beer. So yeah, I can't remember if Schlenkerla things filter their Rauch beers, but I know Spezial, one of the other Bamberg breweries, they certainly filter their beers. But yeah, this is very nice. The middle third of your palate on this one, I think, is really, really nice. And I think the further you go into the aftertaste with the beer, you get a little bit more of a kind of woody character out of it. So I think let's focus on the back third of the palate then, and see what we get there. But I think, yeah, the back third of your palate is definitely a bit more, certainly more yeasty. So in the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, again, you get a little bit of a bready build up in there, a wee bit of a more kind of toasty bread crusty element, and you can feel that on top of all of these layers, on the back third of your palate, you can feel a taller, more yeasty element there. So when you start at the back of your palate, as you come kind of, as you come further forward, you can feel that the how would you say? You can feel that the yeasty qualities just the height of the flavour, I should say. It just starts off like this, and then it condenses down as you come further forward. Then it compresses a little bit further together. The further that you go into the middle third of your palate there. So the flavour starts off tall and just condenses down a wee bit as you go further in. But yeah, I do like how that goes together. You get a wee bit more of a kind of toasty And a little bit of a kind of drier, smoky note out of this one. The woody, I think it's the alder that's giving you that in the back third of the palate too. But on the hoppy side of things then, let's focus on that. In the back corners of the palate, there's certainly a wee bit of an earthiness there. As you move further forward, it smoothens out a little bit, but as you push towards the kind of front corners of the palate, you get a little bit of a floral aromaticity there. But remember, as we said earlier, quite a bit of the hoppy character will have dropped out of this one simply because of how old this beer is. But around the front curve of the palate, you can get the remnants of a sort of grassy ester to it as well. Maybe a wee, there's a wee teeny bit of zestiness to it, but you know, it's really more smooth rather than anything else. You know, at this stage, we shouldn't expect any more of the beer than that, to be honest, on the green side of things. But yeah, that side of the beer gives a good account of itself for sure. But let's focus on that front third of the palate then, and the little bit of fruity character that we have. So border region between front third and middle third of your palate, again you get a wee bit of a bready build-up in there, a slightly drier bread crusty element, a little bit toasty. Then the base of that front third of your palate is a more kind of brown bready sort of thing, a little bit more of a kind of German rye bread note coming out of this one. But yeah, the way that goes together in this one, I think, is quite nice. It's big, smooth, brown bready notes in there, a little bit of a bread crust underneath, and a wee bit of a kind of smoky character as well. So yeah, I do like how this beer goes about its business from that perspective. So yeah, thumbs up to them on the malty, yeasty backbone. The way everything goes together there is great. But on top of that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters roll their way out of the beer. I do wonder what hop they would have used from Tettnang in this one, what variety. But yeah, this is to say Tettnanger and Hallertau Hersbrucker. So yeah, I would have thought maybe they would use a bit of Northern Brewer in this to give it a wee bit more fruitiness and things, but maybe not. The Northern Brewer is quite a popular one for Doppelbocks, of course. I would say in the flavour, there is a wee bit more fruitiness to this beer. So at the back of that front third of your tongue, you certainly get a wee bit more of a kind of dry, pruny sort of thing at the back of the palate. But then as you move further forward, there's a wee bit more of a kind of juicy, figgy sort of thing. Then as you push further forward on the palate into the front half, you get a wee bit more of a kind of you certainly get a wee bit more of a kind of figgy, a wee bit more of a sort of black curranty note, and a wee bit of a more oily blackberry on the front half of that front third of your tongue. So yeah, I really like the sort of oily kind of quality that gets that comes out of this one. But yeah, the fruity vibe that you get out of this beer, I think, is quite nice. It's quite a dried fruity quality, right enough, but there are some oily elements to it as well. But these things, the notes that you get out of this beer, are things that you would expect of the style, to be quite honest with you. So yeah, fruity side of the beer is kind of expected and certainly more prominent than what you could pick up in the aroma. But I think that's all we can really say about the flavour of this beer, to be honest with you. But we can round off the review with a look at the mouthfeel then. But yeah, so on the mouthfeel, I would say this beer is like top end to mid bodied, pushing into the bottom end of full bodied. It's a very, very thick, oily beer, this one, and you know, you have to remember this is a lager beer. It's a Rauchbock, it is a lager beer. Although in fairness, it just kind of says a smoky, does it say? What does it say? Does it say, it just says smoky beer. You know, I would guess this is a lager beer, because the smoke beers tend to be lager beers, but it could be an ale. You know, let's just say that. But I suspect this beer is a lager, and you do get some of the cleanliness out of the mouthfeel of this as well that you would expect of a lager beer. But yeah, I find this to be quite a, you know, it's top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of light-bodied, smooth carbonation, of course. There's a bit of that cleanliness to it, but you know, everything, the way that everything goes together in this beer is quite nice. It's hard to say what IBU this one is. You are getting a bit of dryness from the wood, which could, you know, mix in with the bitterness, but probably I think this beer would be quite a low IBU count, you know, 20-ish or something like that, 25 maybe. But as I say, you get a lot of dryness from the kind of woody characters in this one, a bit of dryness from the smoke and the bread crust as well, and that kind of compensates for bitterness, but you get a wee bit of bitterness off the hops. I think 20 IBUs is probably fair for this one, but big sort of smooth bready characters for the beer, absolutely, so I like that about this one, that's for sure. on the yeah, I think that's definitely a fair that's definitely a sort of fair description of this one in that sense. But yeah, the malty side of this beer is big and thick and smooth. A little bit of sweetness in there, of course, but not too much. Quite a dry, smooth beer rather than anything else. A little bit of oily fruitiness and a wee bit of sweetness there too. But overall, it's kind of everything you would expect of a Rauchbock, but one of the more bready examples that I've had, and I think it's got quite a nice diversity to it as well. So yeah, I think that is a good place to kind of round off on this beer. This is a really interesting one, and it really strikes me as a very nice Rauchbock, and it's certainly still got a bit of that, you know, homebrewed rawness to it, so which adds a little bit of charm. So yeah, really cool that I was able to review this one for you here on the channel, and like I say, this one's been sitting in my fridge for a while, and I've wanted to get a go of it, and finally I got the information on the brewery. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. So yeah, this one was the Nosferaator 2019 edition. 7.9% Rauchbock from Rotiküla Pruulikoda in Pärnu in the southwest of Estonia. A big thank you to Rainer once again for giving me the information for the brewery, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this one. So yeah, thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this one in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Rotiküla Pruulikoda as well, and I will need to try a few beers from the Pärnu brewery the next time I make it over to Estonia. I don't know when that's going to be, but hopefully not in the not too distant future. I love Estonia, a great little country with lovely people, and definitely worth visiting, I would say. But yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Rotiküla's Facebook page as well, and keep up to date with what they're doing. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Terve 6.